This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We have got some big AFC matchups on tap in week number 5. We got the Bills at the Texans, Ravens at Bengals, all on tap this week. We're going to break down those key games and outline where you can find some betting value within them by talking to Meghan Payton of FanDuel TV, picking her brain on those matchups and talking about her best bets across week 5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here once again by Meghan Payton. Check her out on X at Meghan Payton 7. Find her work on FanDuel TV from noon to 2 Eastern every weekday, breaking down stuff with Dubs Anderson over there. Meghan, happy Thursday. Happy week 5 to you. How you doing today?
Hey, Jim. Doing good. Excited. Can't believe we're already at week 5, which is wild. We've got an NFC South game tonight. We've seen some upsets. Favorites aren't covering the spread at the amount that we would have thought at this point in the year. So it's been fun. Couple teams to look out for.
It's been unpredictable, and that's why we love the NFL, right?
Oh, yeah. That's what you want to see. You want to see the upsets.
We want to see the upsets, and personally could probably do for a couple more upsets this week. I'm trying to look at the games we're talking. Don't need upsets in these games, but we'll talk about Meghan's read on these 3 key games. We're going to talk about the Ravens at Bengals, Bills, Texans, Cowboys, Steelers, get Meghan's best bets. We'll talk some regression candidates too, some teams that Meghan thinks could come back to earth a bit throughout the season. We'll get to all that here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast Monday through Friday, talking best bets in college football and the NFL. Our college football week 6 preview with Riley Thomas went up yesterday, breaking down his bets across week 6. Tomorrow, talking player props in the NFL with Austin Swaim live on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, 10 a.m. Eastern, breaking down his best props for this week. Again, that is the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, our brand new YouTube page for all the Covering the Spread and Heat Check podcasts. Our DFS show for week number 5 is also posted on that feed. If you want these shows as they go live, search for the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. Subscribe there, turn on notifications as well, and leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate those of you watching on YouTube right now. Hey, NFL fans, you can make every moment more this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager, only $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Meghan, we'll break down the key games across week 5 here in just 1 second. First, I want to talk to you about regression because we've got 4 weeks of data on all these teams thus far, and eventually some of the teams getting off to good starts will come back to earth a bit. So are there any teams you want to pinpoint as being due for regression in the next couple of weeks?
Let's talk about the 3 teams that no one thought were going to be as good as they are right now. That's Steelers, that's Vikings, that's Seahawks. The Vikings still sitting undefeated. And I'll just give you a little sneak peek. I do like the Vikings to win against the Jets internationally in London, but they'll regress. But what's regress mean? They might lose a couple games. I still think the Vikings are going to be really competitive this season. I think Steelers will see a bit of regression. Obviously, they're still dealing with that quarterback battle, but Justin Fields looks to have done enough to keep that spot. Commanders should regress. They probably won't look as good. Jaden Daniels isn't going to just keep going off in, week out. He's a rookie quarterback for a reason. And then you look at Seattle. I think Seattle probably is due for the most regression out of all those teams because the Seahawks have a tough schedule coming up. All right, they got the Giants this week. So put a line through that one.
Sure.
But then the next few weeks, they've got 3 divisional games in the next 5. They've got to face the Bills in addition to that. They've got the Falcons, Niners. It is not going to be easy for Seattle. I think they had a few easy games to start the year. So the Seahawks would probably be the team that I'd be selling stock on just a bit in terms of regression.
I think with the Seahawks too, the tough thing with them is that Geno Smith's been playing out of his mind. And at some point, you can't rely on him making these insane off-schedule plays. Like maybe Geno is just like a top 5 quarterback all of a sudden, which I would love because I love Geno Smith. But like they're asking a lot of him. And I think that's my biggest concern with them is that maybe he keeps it up, but that interior offensive line has kind of lived down to expectations, I would say, so far. And like maybe Geno does keep rolling like this, but they're asking a lot from him, asking a lot from Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf making big plays. And I feel like the reason why you're probably right on them is that they're just asking those guys to play at superhuman levels, which is tough to do over a 17-game schedule.
And they're already dealing with injury issues on defense. I mean, yes, they go and bring in Mike McDonald, who's a fantastic head coach, was a defensive coordinator for the Ravens, but the linebacker issues continue to pile up. We saw that when Seattle played the Lions. I mean, the Lions put up 42 points on them. If you're going to be a top 10 defense, you can't be giving up 42 points in a game. And so if their identity, which was supposed to be defense, if they can't stay healthy on that side, and then you're asking Geno Smith to throw 300 passing yards every game, and Kenneth Walker, as you mentioned, JSN, Tyler Lockett, there's just too much that has to go right. And even if it does go right, they can still lose games. Like if you were to look at the box score for the offense last week for Seattle, you'd think they would have won that game, but they didn't. And that just shows you some of the holes and some of the issues on this team.
And if we're wrong about the Seahawks, that means that Geno Smith has ascended, and I'll be happy anyway. So no complaints, no matter what happens with the Seahawks. You mentioned the Steelers. We'll talk about them in a bit here. But let's start things off by talking about a big AFC North battle between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Ravens favored by 2.5. Total in this game is 48.5, down a couple of ticks from where it was. There is some wind in this game around 12 miles per hour, so bit of a downgrade there. But Megan, the Ravens have looked unstoppable the past 2 weeks, especially in the first halves, but now on the road facing the Bengals. Can the Ravens keep that train a chugging, or do the Bengals pull off the home upset here?
Bengals are pulling off the home upset,
Love
Jim.
it.
How can you pass up on this opportunity? It's a divisional game, so already it should almost be a pick-em because that's how divisional games are, especially in the AFC North, especially with Joe Burrow as your quarterback. They're coming off that momentum. I get it. Cincinnati never starts strong. It's the topic that's getting very old at this point, year in, year out. They cannot get off to a good start, but they're finding their rhythm. I know it was against the Panthers last week, but put up 34 points. We finally saw that connection with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins. And against the Ravens, they're obviously going to have more motivation with it being a divisional matchup. Baltimore riding high after that blowout against the Bills. So when we talk regression, it's not necessarily that I think Baltimore is going to regress on the year, but they're due for a letdown spot. And in a divisional game, I think it's the perfect time to bounce and back on Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati, like you said, the past 2 weeks looked lively. I know they lost to Washington, but that offense looked very good there. And sure, good matchup. Same thing with the Panthers as well. But the Ravens, they've played great in the first half against the Cowboys and then for the full game against the Bills. I think it's still fair to have some question marks on the defensive side of the football for the Ravens because there was so much turnover there. And maybe they figured things out right away. Maybe that winds up being the case for Baltimore, but I don't want to decide that based on a one game against the Bills and based on a half against the Cowboys, especially because, again, the second half of the Cowboys, they did rally back there. So I think that the offensive line has won me over, Megan, where I'm like, okay, my earlier concerns about them are no longer there. The defense is the part where I'm still not fully convinced that Baltimore is the unit that they were last year just yet.
Yeah, I mean, losing Mike McDonald is a huge loss. Zach Orr comes in, and you've got to give him credit. Former Ravens comes in, and at first it was concerning. We saw a great game against the Bills, but was that an outlier? When we look at bets for this game, yes, I do like Bengals straight up on the money line, but I do like the over as well because Cincinnati's pass defense has not at all proven to be well in stopping this Ravens team. Now, Ravens are going to run the ball more. That's Todd Monken's style. Derrick Henry's been unstoppable when they get within the 5-yard line. I think we'll see a lot of points in this game. And I think there's a little bit of a Zach Orr regression after coming off that Bills game in which essentially Buffalo's offense looked non-existent.
Yeah, so looking at the Bengals, their money line right now at FanDuel Sportsbook plus 120. Megan likes that. Also likes the over. 48.5 points right now. Over is minus 115 as the Bengals take on the Ravens. I think we do see Joe Burrow get back in his lane this week. So he's been looking a lot better recently, looking healthier, and I think that's encouraging for them. So Megan is on the Bengals money line plus 120 and over 48.5. That is minus 115. Another fun AFC matchup this week is the Bills taking on the Texans right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Bills, it's basically a pick 'em. Bills money line minus 110, Texans at minus 108. Total is 47.5. The Bills obviously romped last week, now facing a pretty tough Texans team. So Megan, straight up, who you got? Bills versus Texans.
Straight up, we're taking the Bills. Sean McDermott, 18-5 straight up after a loss, and a pretty embarrassing loss last week, prime time against the Ravens. This is a bounce back spot for Buffalo. I know the big storyline, Jim, is clearly going to be Stefon Diggs playing against his old team. They're in Houston, so I'm sure the public is leaning in on the Texans. But no, this is a Buffalo spot for me. Ultimately, I do think the Bills are a better team. I love the Texans, but we haven't seen the same offense, if we will, as we did last season. The defense hasn't lived up to expectations for Houston. Buffalo's a better team. They're going to come out strong.
I agree with you. I took the Bills money line earlier on this week. They were, I think, plus 102 at that time. And I think that the reason we're seeing the Bills at just minus 110 here is because it's an overreaction to that Ravens game. When you think about the Ravens, they're this bully ball kind of team where they've got 16 different tight ends. Charlie Kohler's playing a lot of snaps for them, and he's their third string tight end. You've got that big personnel with Derrick Henry, and that's not really the Texans game. I'm expecting Joe Mixon back for this one, but they lost Brevin Jordan, their backup tight end, who played a lot in week one when Mixon went off as a rusher. This isn't the same offense. They're not a good running team, even with Mixon being out there. And I don't think they can exploit the Bills' weaknesses as well as the Ravens did. But on the other side, I think the Texans or the Bills can take advantage of the Texans' weaknesses. Now, Khalil Shakir not practicing the first 2 days this week, but if he can't go, they still got Dalton Kincaid and James Cook to exploit the Texans' linebackers, which to me is their big weakness. So I'm fully on board with you. I think the Bills should be favored in this game. I've got them favored by 2.4 points personally. And that's despite the fact I adore CJ Stroud. I just think that the Bills still might be the second best team in football behind the Niners right now. And I don't want to lose sight of that just because they're a pretty poor matchup for that specific Ravens offense.
And let's not forget, almost everyone's a pretty poor matchup against the Ravens, right? Unless you're literally facing them week in, week out, twice a year in the division. It's a completely different team that dominates in the regular season. And it's the same story. So I don't want to overact on the Bills as well. However, I do want to give out a Texans prop because I love a revenge spot, Jim. So I am going with Stefon Diggs over his receiving yards. I think it's set at 51.5.
Yeah.
And I do buy into it a little bit. I buy into the spot of revenge and that there might be some extra play designs for Stefon. He already is going over this naturally. Forget revenge spot. He's blown over this the last 2 weeks, 94 yards. He's definitely a key part to this offense, as we would expect, but he really is splitting that role with Nico Collins. And as much as, Tank Dell girl over here, injuries have been a concern for Tank. I think Stefon Diggs is going to see a lot of targets, maybe a nice deep ball right out of the gate. And I do like to lean into the revenge spot.
And I think that Diggs may have gotten 12 targets in that Vikings game, his first revenge game of the year. So CJ Stroud seems to agree with you where revenge games do matter. So it seems like he's going to pump some targets out Stefon Diggs' way. So Megan liking Stefon Diggs, 51.5 receiving yards, the over there minus 114, and liking the Bills money line at minus 110. I am in full agreement on the Bills money line. I might need some Tank Dell once again Sunday. I know it's not a surprise to you, Megan, that I'd be in on Tank Dell, but Stefon Diggs makes a lot of sense too.
We'll always support Tank.
And we need some Nico point. I just need all Texans. I
know.
need
I
a
all you
shootout. I need
Texans
like a
receivers.
38-36 Bills win on Sunday is what I need.
That's perfect. I'll buy in on that.
Okay, we're all on board there. Let's finish up here by talking about the Sunday night football game. Kind of a fun one, I think, sneaky fun, between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Steelers favored by 1.5. The total is 43.5. That's up a tick from where it was earlier on this week. Cowboys defense down a couple of key starters. No Micah Parsons, no DeMarcus Lawrence for this game. Does that allow the Steelers to actually go to 4-1, or can the Cowboys still claim a win here on the road?
They can claim a win, but I'm going with the Steelers in Sunday Night Football. The injuries on defense scare me. Already, there were issues with this defensive scheme. Mike Zimmer had a lot to prove, didn't look good the last few weeks. And then finally, all right, we see something going on defense. But then what happens? You lose your two top edge rushers, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and that's going to be a front seven that was already struggling. And now you get rid of those two guys. I don't know what they're going to do. And unfortunately, for the Cowboys, we're not getting good injury news on the offensive side of things. Brandon Cooks, who was supposed to step up and be maybe that wide receiver 2 for Dak Prescott, well, he's expected to be out on this game. They can't get a running game going. Ezekiel Elliott shouldn't be given the ball ever again. Rico Daddle's their top guy. It's just this Cowboys team isn't living up to what we'd expect from the Dallas Cowboys. And with the injuries, I don't know how they're going to compete against the Steelers team in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, right now, the money line for the Steelers is -132. The Steelers -1.5, sitting at -115 right now. You talked about the Brandon Cooks injury. I actually do like the under in this game. It went up to 43.5. The under is -102 right now. I know that the injuries on the Cowboys side are on the defensive side of things, which should help the Steelers move the football more effectively. But the Steelers coming off a game where they're facing the Colts, who have a bad defense and run a very fast pace. The Cowboys tend to play in lower scoring games when they play outdoors. I know that's like kind of an older thing for the Cowboys. Used to talk a lot about their home road splits, and it's not as true now. I think they had a 50-point total in that game against the Browns back in week 1, but last week against the Giants, 35 points in that one. We tend to see the Cowboys play a bit lower scoring in these outdoor games, facing a Steelers defense that has played phenomenal so far this year. I see value in the under 43.5 at -102. Do the defensive injuries for the Cowboys scare you off of an under here? Are you sticking with just the side, or any interest for you in the total here in this game?
I like the number that it's at. 43.5 feels like a fair price. So I could definitely be talked into the under. I'd also look at maybe a Justin Fields over in his rushing yards, because, I mean, they'll still try to create that pressure, but ultimately they're not going to be able to stop him. So it's less about the pressure that Dallas is going to create. It's about they're not going to be able to stop it. He could get out into the secondary easily and then take it to the house. But 43.5 still feels like a fair number. Now Justin Fields line sitting, 45.5?
Yep.
I would definitely not be afraid to take the over on it.
45.5, very fair, given this Cowboys defense. I think that does make a lot of sense. I'm going to have a lot of interest in George Pickens. I know that I'm on the under, and I don't like taking anytime touchdown bets when I like the under, but he's +175 red zone targets last week. I'll always have my eyes on George Pickens, regardless of how things turn out with my under bet there. All right, Megan, turning you loose. Open up the board for week number 5. Where else is seeing value at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week?
All right, here's my biggest value bet. I don't know why the Commanders are just 3-point favorites. We're going to Commanders Browns. I know everyone is saying trap game. We just talked regression. Regression's coming for Jaden Daniels, but it's not coming just yet. This should be a -6-point favorite for the Washington Commanders. I will gladly lay the 3 points with them. And it's because obviously what we've been proven with Jaden Daniels, this offense is moving at a fast pace. They look good. But I'm selling all stock on Deshaun Watson. I don't know how much longer we're going to see him as a starting quarterback for Cleveland. If you're the Browns, you've got Kevin Stefanski, whose job's on the line this season. They can't get anything going on offense. At what point do you say the guy we're paying $230 million guaranteed to, he ain't doing it? We got to bring in Jameis Winston. We got to bring in DTR, someone else, because it's not working. And I think that this might be the game in which that opens the Browns' eyes.
And I think the tough thing with the Watson thing is it's a sunk cost. You can't get out of that contract. So like, what is best for your football team right now? And it's probably best if you play someone else at quarterback. They've also got injuries along the offensive line. David Njoku might be back for this one, but the Commanders, I know we talk a lot about their schedule, how many poor defenses they've faced so far, but the Browns haven't been elite so far this year. Myles Garrett's banged up, and you can see it. You can see that he's having to take some plays off, which he never does. It's not the typical Browns defense that we saw last year. And the Commanders, after you adjust for schedule, still rank first in the league in both passing offense and rushing offense after adjusting for schedule. So I laid the 3-2 with the Commanders. It is really scary to do that based on all the things you discussed, but I do think it's right. And yeah, I kind of winced as I pressed like submit, but I do kind of agree with you where like, I can't have any faith in this Browns offense yet.
There's nothing that they've shown us at all to believe in it. And you bring up a really good point about the Browns defense. Obviously, in our head, it's Cleveland. They've got a tough defense. Go back to the game against the Cowboys. Where was the defense there? Myles Garrett hasn't been doing as much because he's been banged up. So on paper, Cleveland isn't good. If you put in all the stats, they aren't a team that should be anywhere close to the competitive level that the Commanders have been. And it's just, I think, our own fear of trap game regression coming at us. I'm happy to lay the 3 points with Commanders. I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be, going off every single week, but this Browns team, he should have a pretty good success against.
I've been more than happy to bet against the Browns for a while now, and I'm happy to do it again this week. Alrighty, that is all that we have here for our Week 5 preview. Talking to Meghan Payton of FanDuel TV again. Find her on FanDuel TV noon to 2 Eastern every weekday there alongside Dubs Anderson talking some NFL over on FanDuel TV. Find Meghan on X at Meghan Payton 7. Meghan, appreciate the time as always. Good luck to you in Week 5 and enjoy all the fun games. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Thank you, Jim. Have a good Thursday Night Football. Go Bucks, by the way.
Go Bucks. I could not agree more. Go Mike Evans as well. Again, Meghan is on X at Meghan Payton 7. I am on X at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Thank you as well to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin. Good luck with your Thursday Night Football bets. Back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, talking top player props in the NFL with Austin Swain. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.